Has Assad been able to remain in power? So far, it seems, because there haven't been any splits in the army, in the security services, because he has a firm grip on the very minor ones perhaps, but because he has this firm grip on the levers of power, and nobody has betrayed him, nobody has is even seriously trying to force him out of office, none of his close advisors anyway. He seems to be able to ride out the storm so far, but he's becoming more and more of a pariah in international terms. And I don't think anybody's going to accept him back into the international community, not feeling the way they do about him, and not with the death toll rising to beyond 3,000 according to the United Nations.
Turning to Tunisia, from the New York Times, in Tunisia, liberals see a vote for change, not religion. We all know that the liberal political parties emerging as surprise runner-up in elections in Tunisia argued on Tuesday their success had tempered the commanding victory of the Islamists, while offering lessons for the secularism allies around the region. We know that Tunisia's Islamists have won the election, but of what they say that they are moderate Islamists. How do you view this? How would the Western accept Islamists running a country from your own perspective?
Well, promises of the Ennahda party, which won the, they're going to wait to see whether the promises of the Ennahda party, which won the, wait to see whether the promises of the Ennahda party, which won the overall majority, are going to be capped over the next year. Will they have an open door policy? Will they continue to allow relatively liberal social policies to go on, like alcohol being available, like women not being forced to wear the veil, this kind of thing? And I think they realize that it's certainly in their interest to live up to their promises, because they want a lot of investment from the outside world. They want to increase trade with Europe, America, even South America. And yeah, they've made a number of promises. If they don't keep them, I think Tunisians in a year are going to vote a different way when they next have elections, and they're going to have regular elections in Tunisia. Everybody's playing in a new field, a democratic field. It means that everybody has to change. Everybody has to abide by the rules. And if they don't, I think you'll see people going back on the streets and the start maybe of another revolution. But I think people are looking at them with some optimism. Big business inside Tunisia is backing them. And it's in everybody's interest that the doors stay open to and with the outside world.
Our other headline from The Independent, but also relevant to the Tunisia issue, and on verge of victory, Tunisia's Islamists commit to Western-style democracy. And if I may say here that the Tunisian victory to Islamists sent a message to the Arab Spring revolutions. What do you think this message is?
I think the message was that the revolution can move ahead, that in a very short time you've had democratic elections, that it's been, by and large, although there have been demonstrations which have had to be put down by the police, the tear gas has been fired in some of the main squares, things like that. But on the whole, it's been a smooth transition to one of the first important democratic milestones. And if Tunisia can do it, well, other Arab states may look at this and say we can do it too. It may be a shot in the arm for Egypt at a time when they're coming up to parliamentary elections here in Egypt, and perhaps people want to see, yes, this can work, we can do this. It can be a relatively smooth process. In Egypt, I think the problems are very different. You have 40 million poor people in this country, which Tunisia, of course, doesn't. Tunisia has a big middle class, a very educated population. Problems are different there. But I think
maybe this is why challenges are growing more in Egypt than Tunisia.
It certainly looks that way. Yes, yes.
Right. Guardian, and to Egypt, to the Occupy movement. The occupiers of Tahrir Square are with you. In many ways, we in Egypt are part of the same struggle, and we are watching in solidarity. Keep going, don't stop. Occupy more. I guess they're speaking here about the Wall Street. These were the messages given to the Wall Street. Do you imagine that Egyptians were giving a message to the Wall Street protesters?
Yes, well, I think solidarity is a lovely thing, but I think they're very different protests. You in Egypt haven't had the chance to protest in the streets in the way that we have had in the West for many, many decades. I remember as a student protesting against the Vietnam War. You know, huge marches then, and ever since then we've marched again, sometimes to not very much effect, I have to say. If you look back to before the start of Britain's intervention in Iraq, there were 1 million people who marched through the streets of London to protest against that involvement, and no notice was taken of them whatsoever. How much notice is going to be taken of the current demonstrations, particularly in Britain, as you may have seen the pictures? A large number of people are camped outside St Paul's Cathedral in London and have prevented the cathedral from going about its daily business. How long that will go on for, I don't know, but it's a very different kind of protest from what's been going on in the rest of the Arab Spring, particularly here in Tahrir Square in Cairo. Very different motives. In the West, you're seeing people complaining about very tangible things like their pensions becoming worthless, their savings becoming worthless, job opportunities shrinking, no opportunities for graduates when they leave university, mounting fees for graduates. Things. Life in financial terms has become very, very hard for these people, and they believe that it's because finance and government have mismanaged the whole thing.
Right. Also from The Guardian and from Tahrir Square to Occupy Wall Street, it's a relevant story. Asma Mahfouz's message to US protesters proves the links between OWS and the Arab Spring are meaningful, not fanciful?
Not fanciful, yeah. Would I agree with that? Not necessarily, no. I think, again, look, these are very different protests, and the background to them is very different. Yes, I mean, many people demonstrated, I think, in Tahrir against corruption. Many of them demonstrated against the fact that there are so many poor, that the state had mismanaged the economy here, but the background is very different.
Right, moving on to Al-Ahram Online, and this is local. So why not applying NDP ban to Islamists too? Now, we know here that this CAF or the authorities were are trying to put a law in order to bar NDP members or remnant of the past regime to practice the political or go inside the political life once again. So liberals here are just wondering why not applying the same law on Islamists too. So do you think this could be done?
I think it's a pity if you start banning parties so early in the revolution. I mean, banning was what the old regime was about. They did that very well. They banned lots of people, locked them up in prison for years, banned all sorts of organizations. I would have thought the time was to get away from that.
But if I may ask you here, of course, of what you had from answers of yesterday during your motion,
I don't think anybody wanted to ban anybody, did they? I mean, they weren't.
No, they were not speaking about, but they were speaking about their fears from remnant of the past regime if they enter into the political scene in Egypt once again, and those who made, who corrupt the political scene in Egypt for decades, if they would enter once again into the political scene, what would it look like?
Well, people know who they are this time. They know what their track record is. They know what the last regime did. If they want to compete, well, let them compete. But I mean, you don't have to vote for them anymore. You don't have to do what they say. You don't have to follow their orders anymore. Life has changed. The political playing field has changed. Don't vote for them.
You mean here that you should leave it to the people? Leave
it to the people to vote. That's supposedly what democracy is about, isn't it? Not having some higher authority banning organizations because who doesn't like them? Because they don't like them? Because a section of society doesn't like them? Let people vote for who they want. They know who they are. They can ask who they are. They can look at their track record, find out. They're going to have to do that with any candidate. So why not with these people?
So another one here from Al-Ahram Online. Dr. Ahmed Ged. He's a famous journalist here, and he says the Arab mistake basing foreign policy on religion. And he said that the issue of Palestine must once again be one of the homeland as a whole, not one of religious sites, as some want to paint the conflict.
Well, I think Arab people, as far as I know, continue to be extremely interested in what happens in the Palestinian territories. I don't think Arab governments have necessarily been that interested, because the Palestinian situation has remained roughly the same for decades. And to be honest, Arab states haven't done necessarily as much as they could do to change the situation or to provide aid for the Palestinians in financial terms. Actually, it's been the European Union that's financed the bulk of the Palestinian Authority expenses for a considerable number of years. When you look at some of the rich countries of the Gulf who could have done it much more easily, you tend to wonder why, when they say, you know, they need to support the Palestinians continually. Where it goes from here with the Palestinian issue and where foreign policy in the Arab world goes, I think we're all waiting to see. We're all waiting to see the complexion of the new governments that emerge here.
Mr. Tim, I have only 3 minutes to just finish out this episode, and
probably sounds more than enough, doesn't it?
Right, so I need to know a few things about your opinion and several things concerning Egypt. Now, from what you've heard yesterday, many questions of anti-regime and pro-regime went on yesterday, and they were speaking about many challenges. What exactly were the challenges that you really felt were the country needs to confront them?
Look, our debate, I mean, just for the sake of clarity, our debate was about whether the military are committed to genuine reform. The military rulers, current military rulers in Egypt, are committed to genuine reform. And I know it wasn't necessarily a representative snapshot of Egyptian society, but a large group of people in that audience, large group of mainly young Egyptians, thought that they were not.
Intellectuals.
And the intellectuals thought that they were not in favor of genuine reform. And they talked about reports of abuse in the prisons, of torture, of forced virginity tests on women, of some 12,000 trials of civilians, which people said were unfair. A lot of people said were unfair.
Right, but that was never really, I mean, it was never really proved. I mean, there was no evidence to...
Who said there was no evidence? I mean, Human Rights Watch has produced case after case after case. Well, some guests said that it wasn't proved. Those who were pro-military said it wasn't proved. The others seem to think it was proved.
Right. So what are the challenges? What are the real challenges? I mean, one big challenge that I found here was the next parliament. And
the challenge is to go from military rule, isn't it, to civilian rule? Isn't that what everybody in this country wants?
Right. But what about the next parliament? One of your guests said that the upcoming parliament would be fragments. Because of...
Well, it would be surprising if it wasn't, wouldn't it? The first parliament after a revolution, after 60 years of dictatorship in this country, it would be surprised if the political forces weren't fragmented. It's going to take, I would have thought, a long time to get stable, united political blocs who are going to coalesce around policies and policy leaders. You know, you've got something like, what, 80 parties now in this country? I don't think any democracy can function with 80 or even more parties. I think you're going to have to come down to a reasonable number where people see some clear choices available. And I think that's going to take some time.
One final issue in half a minute. What do we need? What does Egypt need in this upcoming phase?
It needs the rule of law. It needs transparency. It needs honesty. And it needs to answer the needs of the people who have shown bravery and courage in an extraordinary revolution.
Mr. Tim Sebastian, famous interviewer, I hope I've been able to conduct this interview properly.
It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much.
The pleasure was all ours, and it was an honor. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. The honor was mine. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Dear viewers, many thanks for watching and good night.